Welcome back to the Praying and Slaying podcast, a Light the Fire Outdoors production. On this episode, Aaron joins his wife, Jessica, on their very first antelope hunt here in Montana for the 2021 season. This will be the story of Jessica's first antelope, and let's see if they can make it a double on this first ever hunt. With that, let's jump in with Aaron and hear the story. What's going on, everybody? It's Aaron here with the Praying and Slaying podcast, coming at you with another solo episode here. Everybody here from Light the Fire Outdoors Praying and Slaying Nation is having an awesome season so far, man. It's pretty cool. Season is well underway out here. To kick off the year, I got my first elk. You guys heard that story. That's been awesome. Elk with a bow. And it's been antelope ever since, man. So Jess and I are both tagged out. That's the story you're going to hear today. My brother and I tagged out. You'll hear that story coming up here. From a Wyoming hunt, which is awesome. So we got a ton of antelope meat, our absolute favorite meat that there is. Just can't beat it. So got an awesome freezer full of that. And looks like John got his big buck the other day. Hopefully we're going to hear that story coming up. And man, we'd love to get Jeremy back on here as well. He's been super slammed with stuff, but his dad got a bull moose, which is absolutely stellar, once in a lifetime drawing opportunity for Montana. So some super cool stories. Hopefully we're going to be hearing coming up, man. But yeah, the weather has finally turned up here in Montana. It was a crisp 19 degrees in the mornings here this weekend. Still got frost on the ground in the backyard I'm looking at right now today, and I can't wait to get out there and hopefully start throwing some deer tags here. That's my favorite type of hunting personally. So definitely going to be some cool stories coming up here. So be sure to tune in for all the next episodes of the Praying and Slaying podcast as we get them rolling out to you. But today I want to tell a story about my wife's first ever antelope hunt. This was her first year drawing a tag here in Montana. So that's pretty exciting for her. I know she puts in every year with me for all the different things. I've been lucky enough to draw antelope two tags last year. That was my first draw. Filled one of the two, got my first buck last year, but this was her first year of actually drawing a tag. And that's always an exciting time anywhere you live, or, if you happen to live in another state and you put in for a state that you draw, it's always a super exciting time, high anticipation of what you may or may not draw. And when you draw, it's just that much more exciting and all the planning goes into effect. So, definitely a cool opportunity there. We both ended up drawing doe tags for the same unit, which is right outside of town here. So didn't have to travel far, and there's lots of antelope in it. So we just had to kind of put some time in to figure it all out. So I'm pretty familiar with the unit that we did draw. It is a unit that's fairly close to where we live, which is awesome. It's definitely a cool opportunity to get out and when you draw a tag that you don't have to travel a whole long ways for, because Montana is a gigantic state. So being able to stay close to home is always a plus. It allows you to hunt more, travel less, and especially when you got a wife, man, or, someone who's newer to hunting, a little kid, whatever. I mean, the less time you spend in the car and the more time you put, time in out in the field always seems to go a little bit better and a little bit more excitement that way. So anyway, I'm pretty familiar with the unit. Like I said, I drew my antelope tags there, or my buck tag in this unit last year. So we did a lot of traveling around with a buddy of mine. Looking for bucks and a lot of good places to see. But the one thing I kind of wanted to do with this game plan was last year looking for a buck, going out on opening day, which is what my wife and I were planning to do this year as well. Man, there was a ton of hunters. And it was like one of those situations when, you'd be driving around, you'd see a group of antelope off in the distance. And if you sat there and just glass the situation, check it out, like for sure you would see two groups of hunters already on that antelope, or that group of antelope getting ready to chase it and all guns out, ready to rock. It was intense. So opening day, I had a little bit different game plan this year, especially getting a newer hunter out in the situation. I wanted a calmer scenario. I didn't want to put my wife in a situation where we're competing with too many people, even though it's really tough to do, especially on opening day, rifle season. There's just going to be a lot of excitement, a lot of excited hunters out there, and a lot of people out there typically. So I kind of looked at the unit a little bit different and tried to pick places that were big. So if there were people there, we could hopefully, figure out a game plan of where they're at and maybe go a different direction, or go a little deeper than somebody might be, or a little shallower than someone might be on a unit. And there were several spots that I found but that really dumbs down the amount of spots you can look for antelope in. And then I also wanted to hit it from a little bit different direction, because I think part of the reason last year we ran into so many people is because we really started off one of the main highways that borders or is like the border of this unit. So I think that played a lot into it. You get, highways mean more towns, mean more people, mean more hunters. And I think they're easier to get to also. So I kind of took the less beaten roads out to a couple of the bigger spots, and it ended up paying off for us. Not necessarily in numbers of antelope. We definitely didn't see a ton of antelope like we did in some of the other places last year. But on the flip side, we ran into way less antelope hunters and actually a lot more bird hunters, which was kind of interesting. So just a good time to be out. So I put a lot of time into Onyx, scouting. I absolutely love the Onyx hunt map system. I just use it on my phone. So anyway, we made a game plan. We ended up traveling on the north side of this unit first to hit a couple big blocks of state ground that I had found that I really wanted to check out, and hopefully get my wife on her first antelope. So we loaded up the truck, got all the gear. This is her first hunt with her very own rifle. We got her a Weatherby Camilla in 6.5 Creedmoor the year after we moved up to Montana. And that's her first rifle. And this was her first chance to get it out of the box, really, and do some damage with it. So we had that zeroed in at 200 yards, dead nuts. And we hit the field, man. Had the blaze orange on, backpacks, a little bit of warm gear, some snacks, some water, and we hit the field. So just a pro tip here, whenever you're hunting with, for me, it's my wife, because she's the person that I get to hunt with who's the most new to hunting, or, kids, people with kids, whatever the case is, man. One thing I learned really quick is you got to have some snacks and drinks and things to keep you occupied when things get boring. So the first thing we do every single time we go out is we stop at the coffee shop, get her some coffee. And then we hit the convenience store, make sure the truck's filled up with gas. And we make sure we've got snacks in the truck, plenty of ices we like to drink, or, whatever the case is, water, Gatorades, yada, yada. So anyway, that's always a plus, because then she's ready to rock. She knows, hey, worst case scenario, I drive around and have a picnic in the truck. So we always make sure to do that, but that seems to keep things on the up and up right out of the gate, sets the tone for the day. And, there's always some happiness in making sure your stomach and your thirst is quenched. So, but man, so we ended up heading north out of town, and on the way out, we, had a ton of trucks on the highways and stuff. But once we really dove in to the unit, there really wasn't a lot of traffic, which was really good to see. We stopped at a couple spots, and we, no antelope hunters, because there was no blaze orange running around, but we did find a couple parked trucks. So the first thing you do when you see a parked truck on any one of these things, you try to figure out where that person's at, so you don't just go dive in and ruin their hunt, or, get into a situation where maybe something's unsafe. So we didn't really find any of these people that were parked in this first place we went. So we just kind of stayed on the high ground, glassed around. There weren't any antelope on it. And so we moved right on to the next section. And the deeper we got into here, this is where, again, we started running into some more vehicles. And I was kind of concerned that we were going to end up running into a bunch of hunters. And we really didn't. We just found a bunch of trucks parked in different areas that we weren't necessarily hunting. And when we finally got to one big piece of state ground that I was really excited about, we did find that there was a couple trucks parked there and people out running around, but they were bird hunters. So number one, it was a good thing to find that they were bird hunters and not antelope hunters. But number two, that also means they have dogs running around. So if there's dogs running around and a person running around, there's not going to be any antelope like anywhere in the vicinity. So that was kind of concerning. So we started, just parking and really diving into the maps again to try to maybe make a game plan for a little later in the day, or try to figure out if there were some spots we could access in these spots that maybe the antelope would get pushed to, where they felt safe from the other hunters and the dogs and things like that, but weren't necessarily right in the action of those other people. So as we were doing this, we pulled over in one field entrance, and we were just kind of making a game plan of what we wanted to do. And we just got outside the, area where a lot of these bird hunters were at. And lo and behold, some of our friends from in town here, one of the ladies my wife works with and her husband, both, they happened to buzz right on by. And so they saw our truck, whipped in, we said hi and got talking to them. And they actually were out for antelope as well for opening day, trying to get this lady's buck tag filled. And anyway, apparently he had actually hunted this unit before. So the spot we were sitting, right out of the gate, he goes, "You guys looking for antelope?" And we're like, "Yep." He goes, "Well, I'm going to tell you right now, you're not going to find anything on this whole half of the section. I promise you that. If you're going to find antelope here, they're going to be all down to the south." That's just kind of how they run through this unit. And so that's just super helpful. You get a guy who's hunted before, and it instantly cut our search in half of the giant piece of land here that we're about to hunt. I mean, this section is several miles wide, and even about twice, maybe three times as long. So a lot of ground to cover. So he cut us in half and said, "Hey, let's drive actually down to the spot where you have to park for the furthest south on this unit you can drive to, and then I'll kind of give you some pointers." We headed down there, parked the trucks, got out. And so he's showing me on the map, hey, here's kind of what I would do. Walk down this road. He said, you're going to see two giant cuts that come out of it eventually. One's about a quarter mile in. The other one, maybe a half to 3/4 of a mile in. And, so that's what I would hunt, is those little cuts, those coulees. And that's probably where, if they're in here, you're going to find those antelope. So just an awesome opportunity. Again, utilizing someone else's experience, putting a little hunt prep in. It was a good spot. We picked a good spot. So that was a confidence builder. Just looking at a map, you're not always sure, but being able to cut your search in half of where to even look on one of these giant pieces of ground was extremely helpful. So he kind of told me what his game plan was. And, if you get something, call us. If we get something, we'll call you. Or if we find some animals to chase, because they had buck tags, we had doe fawn tags here. So we were going to split the difference, and try to help each other out a little bit. So they took off. My wife and I got ready. We get Jess out of the truck, got the guns ready, got our packs ready, water, drinks, clothes, warm stuff. And we headed into this giant section of state ground. So another thing to maybe consider if you're taking a first timer in, or somebody who's maybe not as diehard into the hunting scene. My wife, she likes to go. She loves exploring the outdoors, but it's not like her dedicated hobby. So, the one thing I liked about this piece when I picked it out on a map is I knew it had some terrain features that could hold animals, deer, antelope, whatever. But at the end of the day, moderate at best as far as level of exertion it was going to take to get in, hunt the area well, and get back out to the truck if we got something, or just hike back out if we didn't. So that was part of, my search on Onyx over the weeks leading up to this hunt. I was trying to find places where we could get into and out of easy, because there is some really rough country in this, and it does hold a lot of antelope. But if someone's really not a diehard into it, or, really gung ho, like some of those things you can kind of write off as, something maybe go check out yourself if you're more into it or not. So anyway, this spot was nice because we actually, it was all gated off. It's state ground, state of Montana. So all we had to do is cross a fence basically, but then there's a road that you can walk. The entire duration of the south side of this property, and everything you're going to hunt is off to the west. So you're just kind of looking off to the west, checking things out, glassing a little bit, but just walking a pretty flat road and really nice. So we get right about 400, 500 yards into this thing. And the first coulee, you can kind of start seeing it just taper off to the side, off to the west. And so I kind of take a moment to pause. We're glassing around, don't see anything right away. So we end up walking another 40, 50, 60 yards. And somehow, I'm not sure how, out of the corner of my eye, something just looked a little funny by this rock pile. I check it out, get the binos on it. There's our first antelope, about 900 yards ish away off the road. There's a beautiful buck antelope. We don't have tags for a buck, but either way, super exciting to see that first animal of the season with gun in hand. And get my wife on it, kind of walk her into it. She finds it with her binoculars, and then right there with it, 4 does, or does and fawns. So we're like, perfect, that's the group we're going to try to chase. The only problem is they're 900 yards across a wide open wheat field, like absolutely zero cover, not a ton of terrain features between us and them. They see us, they're 900 yards out, and they are keyed up on us. All eyes are locked on where we are there in the road. And so we're kind of start talking to say, okay, let's plan this out. We had 2 options. We could either go back to the north the way we came on the road, and it would end up putting a real gradual rise, like hill basically, between us and them, to where we could probably end up cruising on the north side of that. And hopefully the way it shouldered off on their side, we'd be able to get up on a hill, maybe have a shot if they decided to keep going that direction. In my mind, as far as the stock was concerned, that was probably the best bet. And the only catch to it was that we were going to, again, possibly run into a longer range shot opportunity that we really weren't prepared for. Not ideal, but it seemed like the best option. My wife, though, she was like, I actually think, why don't you just drop into this coulee and then sneak up behind them? And so in my head, the way I was reading the terrain here, it looked like we would drop into this coulee. First off, we're going to have to walk 3 times as far, because coulees, if you ever dropped into them, they're not straight. Like there's 0 straight lines in them. You're zigging and zagging and up and down and over. And it's really, you could get lost in them if they're a really complex system like we get up here in Montana in some cases. This one, not so much, but, to break that 900-yard distance between us and them, taking the coulee route was going to take us probably a good hour and a half, possibly 2 hours of just walking and hoping those antelope are going to be there. And if you know anything about antelope, they move. They constantly move. They're hardly ever sitting still. And when they are, it's for, a little bit at a time. They're not really hanging out all day. in one location. They like to kind of like wander and move across their landscape. So this route was going to take more time. I was concerned about that. I wasn't positive we'd be able to sneak up on them because the way the terrain looked like it laid behind them, I thought they were going to have a view of whatever was behind it for the 400, 500, 600 yards. So I really wasn't excited about that. But weighing the two options, I said, hey, this is your hunt, your first antelope. And, anytime I get to go out with her or somebody that's new to it, I've taken several people that are new to hunting out over the last couple of years. I really like to let them kind of guide the day, because part of hunting in my mind is getting out into the field and just learning from experience, taking it all in, making one choice, seeing how it results, or making another decision and seeing what happens with that. That all goes into it. So I really like to, I'll drop some knowledge if I feel like it's needed, but at the end of the day, hey, you know what, you make this call and we'll try it out. If you feel like that's best, let's do it. And then I can kind of utilize some of maybe my knowledge while we go do those things to make sure we have the best case scenario, or at least most educated decision possible. So we end up diving in to this coulee. So we ended up diving into the coulee, and that's the decision we made. She called the coulee. We dropped into the coulee. So when the wife says go, you go. And anyway, so we drop off the antelope, watch us drop in to this coulee system. And, it was really cool kind of hearing my wife at first, because she was like, hey, we got to make sure we stay just below this rim. It was interesting, like how much she's picked up just in the handful of times we've been out hunting from, the little things that I talk about or whatever. Like she's like, we don't want to skyline ourselves. Let's stay low behind this hill so they don't see us. And in my mind, I'm like, we're so far away. I don't know what their mental process is at 900, 1,000, 1,200 yards, whatever we were at the time. But anyway, just those little things. It was kind of neat watching her learn and again, utilize that experience from her time in the field, even if it's more limited. So that was pretty cool. So we drop into this coulee system. We get below, out of the antelope's line of sight, and we're not really sure what they are. And in my mind, I'm like, okay, we need to book it. Like, I know where those antelope are at now. I don't know how we're going to find them, or, we're possibly going to bump them if they drop back into the system or whatever, but we need to get up there as quick as possible, because those guys can cover ground a lot faster than we can, especially if they're feeling uncomfortable. And I know there was possibly some other people hunting in that unit to this, even further to the south of us, because we heard a few gunshots over during this time off in that direction. So if this was part of a group that had already been shot at, they could be super spooky. If they haven't been bothered, they might just be super calm. You don't know. But it was kind of funny, because basically I'm walking this coulee system. I'm trying to pick out like cattle trails or game trails on the sides, because if you've ever walked again in these coulee systems, these hillsides are like super steep. They're basically like washouts that drop down into the ground. And depending on where you're at or what river system, water system you're in, they can be super deep and steep and everything else. And this one was pretty steep. So it's kind of an ankle killer. So we're trying to pick out, like cattle trails, like I said, or antelope trails or whatever, been moving through there and kind of staying on their little paths along the side hills to make it easier on the ankles. And it was just kind of fun listening to her, because there was tons and tons of antelope sign in here. Like they were for sure hanging out in this coulee system over the last few days, some fresher than others, but man, just scat everywhere, tracks all over the place. You could see where they were bedding. You could see where they'd been grazing a lot. And it was just kind of cool, because my wife's anywhere from 10 feet to 10 yards behind me at any given time. And she keeps whispering, but the wind was blowing right in her face and I couldn't really hear her. So I'd stop and turn around, and she's like, oh, look, there's fresh poop right there. Or look at these tracks, or look at this, look at that, look at their beds. Which again, I love hearing all that kind of stuff, because it's stuff, in my mind, I just register. And when you've hunted for a long time, you just kind of like log these things and notice them, but you don't ever talk out loud or point them out. Even if you're hunting with a buddy who's hunted for a long time, like you don't always just point those obvious things out. But it's just super exciting to her, and she's judging how fresh it is, and she's excited too, because you can tell like the amount of sign that's in here, we're in a good spot. And she made a good call getting down on that coulee system. We're likely to run into antelope at any given time, so she's on edge, I'm on edge. It's a really cool time. And then she had the Tacticam 5.0 wide, which is the one I carry on the tripod for all the extra B-roll stuff, or filming her, or filming me, or whatever we're doing. And so she had that camera, and she's taking in the sunrise, and she's filming the clouds, and she's filming all this sign and filming me. So basically I'm trying to ride this line of like, I want to hustle and cruise through this coulee system as fast as I can so we can get up to where these things might be. And she's just, she's behind me soaking it all up. So basically I'm trying to shuffle with all the wind noise and pick out the sound of her footsteps behind me crunching on some of this ground. And whenever I'd lose sound of her crunching, I'd stop and wait, and I'd kind of slowly turn around, and she'd be 30, 40 yards back there filming something and then catch up. So anyway, that was a really fun part of the hunt for me. And I know she was enjoying herself and just kind of taking her time and enjoying it as well, which you get kind of frustrated a little bit because, again, my mind and my heart are just set on like, hey, let's go, let's go, let's go, let's get there. But you turn around, you see something like that, and then you kind of take a little bit of a reflection and think, what am I missing here? Because, I've got a singular focus on getting to those antelope and trying to get us a shot. She's got a focus of, I'm just going to take it all in. Doesn't really matter what happens here. So we kept moving through this coulee system at a pretty good clip. And there was one point in time where we kind of came up on this, there's like a dam down in the coulee where you can tell a farmer dammed it up at one time trying to catch water. And it was going to take us up to where we would skyline ourselves coming out of it. And then we could drop back down and on the backside of the dam. And anyway, so I kind of let my wife go first. We went up over the top. We just got to the point where we were glassing where we thought these antelope should have been. And we kind of had it landmarked because there was 3 rock piles. Like basically the antelope were standing at the end of the coulee system and these big piles of rocks that the farmers had piled up over the years. And we got glass on it. And I don't know if we were looking at it maybe from a different angle or whatever. But long story short, the antelope just weren't there. So I'm like, okay. In my mind, I thought, we got 2 scenarios here. Either A, the antelope have moved off. We're going to have to totally relocate them, when we get to the end of this coulee system, or B, they came back towards us. So we really got to be careful and take our time. So, this kind of changed our pace a little bit because now there is a possibility. And with all the sign that's in this coulee, like very well, the antelope could have just worked back down in and been feeding their way towards us, or who knows what. So in a coulee, you've really got to be careful. It's kind of like if you've ever, I guess, walked around anything, whether it be a wall or a door frame or whatever. Next time you do, just take a look at what you can see from one position and then take one step. And in a coulee system, what's going to happen every time you got a bend in front of you going in any direction, you're going to take one step and it's going to open you up to like 50 feet at the furthest point of what you can see, and which also means what can see you. So every single step makes a huge difference in the perspective that you have on where you're going. And it also opens up a lot of room for something else to see you the way you're coming. So we're kind of getting to this spot where it's really doing a lot of twists and turns, which means a lot of slow moving stuff. And you got to start thinking more about the noise you're making and stuff too, because there could be a time where you could be 20 yards from something and not know it and take one footstep. And all of a sudden you see whatever's in front of you, but it also could hear you, or 1,000 other things could go wrong. So, anyway, that was kind of fun, zigging and zagging in there. And my wife did a great job keeping up and just working the system with me. And we kind of took turns going high and low and kind of watching all directions. Cause then you get to some situations where that coulee will fork. And now you got, for every step you take, you've got 100 yards extra view behind you, and you got 100 yards extra view ahead of you. And now you got 100 yards extra view off to your left, right, whatever. And there was a couple points in this coulee where it would do that. It would kind of triangle off, and you had 3 ways to go. One direction towards the antelope we were trying to get to, but the other options now, those systems open up as well. So there could be a lot of stuff going on in there where you really want to make sure you're taking your time and taking it all in. So getting the binoculars up every few steps, really going through that stuff. And anyway, so we played, like I said, kind of tag team leapfrog and worked this system, which I felt was very, very thorough. Really proud of the way that worked out. Didn't end up spooking anything out. We did spot a mule deer in there, which is cool, which if you spot them before they spot you, that's a win. So I thought we were doing it right, kind of how we did it. So we end up getting all the way to the end of this system, and we're kind of coming up to the system now, and it's almost exactly like I thought. Like if we end up in this spot we ended up being in, I thought those antelope, if they stayed where they were at, they were going to be able to see us coming from half mile away. And that's exactly what it was. There's a little bit more terrain breakup in there, which is nice. Like you could have probably made it work, but the antelope just weren't there, which worked out in our favor. So, at that point, there was a little bit of a letdown. It's like, we did this, 1.5 mile hike or whatever it was to get all the way around this system here. And nothing was there. So, it might not have paid off. And kind of looked at her and I said, well, we got a couple options. We can go all the way out into the end, which we're going to be in a situation where we run into the option of skylining ourselves, but we could go to the rock piles where they were and kind of use those as some breakup. Or we can go down, like I said, there was lots of other options to go down and travel through in this coulee system. We could go check out some of those. And she was like, well, let's go ahead and get up to the top of this thing where it all ends up. get to those rock piles, and then we'll kind of reconvene from there. And so that's what we did. What's up, guys? It's Aaron coming at you with a break from the podcast here to remind you to go over and check out lightthefireoutdoors.com. And today I want to just make sure I call out specifically the Blackhound Optics 4-14 by 44 first focal plane mill scope. And that's actually the scope that I was using on my new 6.5 PRC on this hunt, as well as the gun that I took down with my brother to Wyoming on a hunt you're going to hear about here in a next follow-on episode podcast. But man, these Blackhound Optics, I can't say enough about them. The price point, first and foremost, is absolutely phenomenal. You get way more than what you pay for with these scopes. Second, the glass quality is amazing. I've been able to see, during bear season, I was out filming deer across the canyon at last light in dark timber at like 700-800 yards, and you could just totally make them out. Awesome glass clarity, tons of light transmission there, and they allow for easy follow-up shots. First year getting into the mill scopes from MOA, and I absolutely love it. The reticle makes it super easy for holdovers. My brother and I made some pretty cool long shots you're going to hear about on the next podcast. And so if you are in the market for a rifle scope, consider supporting Light the Fire Outdoors and the Praying and Slaying podcast by getting yours from us at lightthefireoutdoors.com. At the shop, check out all of the Blackhound Optics we have to offer. And like I said, they make a great scope, great price point, and you're supporting veterans, conservation, and ministry outreach here at Light the Fire Outdoors by getting yours from us. So let's get back to this hunt and hear more about how I used my Blackhound Optic 4-14 by 44 to finish up this hunt. So we make our way up to these rock piles, kind of taking our time because, again, when you're on a hill or any kind of an elevation difference, if you're taking the low ground, every step you take up, it opens up a lot of view in front of you. And with antelope and a lot of other animals, but antelope I found specifically, like they'll get super spooked if something comes out of there that they're not really familiar with, like really quick, and you skyline yourselves fast. But if you kind of come up at a slow pace and the first thing they can see is just a little bit of your head, and then all of a sudden, like you can see them with your eyes, but they see a few inches of your forehead and your hat, basically, they're a lot more curious of an animal. So a lot of times if you just sit there and don't move, but they've spotted you, they'll just kind of go back to whatever they were doing. So we were being real careful about that. And we kind of gradually just keep going over their eyes. And next thing you know, we're basically against a rock pile scanning this entire wheat field where we can see the road where we came in on. We can see all around us, and there's absolutely nothing. We had one mule deer, that same mule deer we had spotted. She came up out of the coulee, saw us, and bounded back the opposite direction. So then the first thing we kind of do is take a look. Okay, well, maybe we made the wrong call. Like maybe we should have came in from the north and not the south. But then we, looking the way from the antelope's perspective, from where they were, like we wouldn't have been able to sneak in from the north. So it was a really good call for my wife to have us go down into the coulee first, because at the end of the day, that was probably the only option that would have worked anyway. So we're sitting there, we're kind of like, okay, that's cool. We get some water, we get a snack, we get all this stuff packed up, packs back on. And then we're like, well, what do we want to do? So we kind of determined we could walk to the edge of the state property. We're all the way across the other side of this at this point, and kind of look down the fence line. Sometimes antelope will hit a fence and just take off down. And the way this terrain kind of laid, I felt like if we got over to close to that fence, we could probably see quite a ways to the north and quite a ways to the south. Plus, at that point, we could just drop back down into the coulee system and work our way south again instead of the direction we were headed. And we determined that was going to be the case. So I just kind of freely walk out from behind the rock pile, forget everything about the skylining yourself thing, because I really wasn't expecting to run into any antelope. We get 40 yards maybe heading towards the fence, and just out of the corner of my eye again, I just see a little bit of black, enough for me to turn my head, and I see an antelope buckhorn standing less than 100 yards away. And I just hit the dirt. I turned around, and instinctively my wife dropped down too. And we're both just sitting there. And I was like, did you see that? And she's like, no, what? And I was like, there's a buck like right there, 100 yards, just behind this little tiny itty bitty hill between him and us. And so we get the packs off, I get the spotting scope off with the spotter LR. I'm getting ready to start filming and stuff, because I'm not sure what's going to happen now. But, that buck for sure saw us. Like he was keyed on me when I locked eyes with him and hit the dirt. So we're sitting there, and I'm getting her ready. She's kind of getting excited, get her gun out, get the bipod on her gun. And, it's time to rock now. Like, so I'm like coaching her through this. Hey, if this is going to happen, it's going to happen quick. I'm going to slowly stand up and see if I can figure out where that buck is. Cause he's off limits, but his does have got to be with him. If he's there, more than likely that the group of does he was with is got to be there. And so I slowly start standing up and I barely get past like bent over basically at 90 degrees, and boom, I see horns like through the stubble in the wheat field that we're in. And he's keyed right up on us. And I'm like, gosh, dang it. Like, good news is he didn't spook right away, which was awesome. Bad news is he's right there, less than 100 yards. He knows we're there. So I'm halfway expecting him to come to us because antelope, again, they're super curious. I thought he was going to come over, check us out, see us, and bolt. One thing we had to our advantage is the wind is blowing dead in our face, just absolutely perfect. I mean, there's no way he's going to smell us, just kind of figuring out what's going to happen now. So we end up sitting down and just waiting for a while. And I every couple minutes, I'd slowly do that slow stand up and he'd be sitting there again. And one time I stood up and I didn't see horns. Either A, he bolted, or B, he's there. So I motioned my wife, she comes over. I said, okay, let's start working our way around the hill, but we're going to have to crawl a little bit at a time. That way, if we do skyline ourselves, it's just a little bit, not a lot. So we get on our knees, we both start crawling on our knees towards, around the hill from where this antelope was. There's a little tiny rise in the hill. And we stop. I stand about halfway up. I see horns again. So we drop back down and wait, and I'm slowly stand up, and he puts his head down and just starts feeding, which was absolutely beautiful. Like, we're less than 100 yards from this thing, and he's like, whatever was there wasn't enough of a threat. I'm not too worried about it. So really good thing, again, hammering that lesson. And if you're going to skyline yourself, do it a little bit at a time, because the perceived threat is totally different than if he just saw two upright humans walking that close. He would be long gone by now. So again, keeping that wind in our favor, we keep edging around this hill. And then finally I get to the point where I can see him from how we're crawling, and I just keep the binos up. He's casually feeding, not worried about anything. So I start scanning for his does at that point, and I cannot find him. So I have my wife, I said, hey, you stay back here. I'm going to slowly crawl up and just kind of survey the situation to see if we can figure this out. Because if the does aren't there, the does aren't in shooting range or whatever, this might just be a lone buck. If he's, but either way, we don't want to spook him. One body's better than two. So I get up to a point where I'm kind of laying basically on top of that little hump where he, that was between us and him. He'd actually moved on a little bit, about 50, 60 yards away, and kind of down the hill. And so I was just kind of keeping it to where even with his head up, he, basically couldn't see me laying in the stubble, but I could see his horns and his body just fine. And so I'm laying there and I start surveying, and I finally find a bedded doe. She's bedded about 75 yards from him in some taller grass, just broadside, perfect bed. I range her. She's right at like 230 yards, at like perfect. Guns are zeroed at 200. This should be a nice opportunity to get Jess on this doe. So I motion her up. She does a great job belly crawling up to me. I help her finding and kind of key in on where that doe's at. We get her gun set up. At this point, it's a stakeout. Like, game plan, I'm going to search for the other doe so we can possibly double up, or the other doe fawns, whatever they were with her. And in the meantime, we're going to keep the wind traveling the way it is. We're not going to move from this position. The buck doesn't know we're here. He doesn't care. The doe's bedded at 230 yards. That's target one. And everything else, we're going to start just kind of looking for to see if we could maybe double up, and I, start searching for the other does. So now Jess is on the does, or she's on her doe. It's definitely the big herd doe in the group. And, she's asked me, how do you, trying to figure this whole situation out, because we weren't sure when she was going to stand up or any of that. But I just kept telling her that buck's up on his feet. Eventually she's going to get up and they'll start moving around. She'll get up to feed or do her thing or whatever. Antelope don't stay bedded long, yada, yada, yada. Just stay patient, stay on him. And about that time, kind of get through, she's settling in, getting comfortable, getting behind the gun, resting the gun, perfect crosshairs on this doe. And I finally find one of the other doe fawns with her, and it's facing dead away from us. So I get my gun lined up on that one. And I'm resting my binoculars on my bino case, like upright, and using them basically like a bipod for my gun. And so I let her know, hey, I'm on mine. And it's a waiting game at this point. Eventually they're going to stand up. And when they do, take your time. Your doe will be perfectly broadside for you. Take a shot. Once I hear your shot go off, I'll try to make a shot on mine if they don't bolt. So we end up waiting there, and I feel bad for my wife because she's laying there in a little bit more awkward position than I was. And so it gets to the point where these things are laying there for like 45 minutes. I feel like we were laying there maybe closer to an hour. And I definitely didn't think it was going to be that long, but the buck bed's down. Everybody's comfortable. They're chewing their cud. They have no idea we're there. And so my wife, she keeps having to stretch her back and roll over and do all these things. And in the meantime, I'm holding the gun, keeping it steady where, so she can come back up and get behind it. And it ended up being a longer stakeout than what I thought, but she was a trooper. The wind was blowing pretty solid, but again, right in our face. So good shooting conditions. And eventually, like I said, after 45 minutes or 50 minutes, the fawns stood up. And so I got my gun on the fawn. I told Jess, I was like, hey, get ready. One of the does finally stood up. And about that time, I just kind of take my eyes out of my scope and I look over at her doe, and it's standing there broadside looking right at us. And I was like, oh, Jess, here we go. It's time to go. So she flips her. I hear her safety flip off. I put my gun on one of the other doe at lightthefireoutdoors.com. But yeah, she's all happy and excited that we got it. But you can kind of hear the little bit in her voice of like, man, I wish I would have got that, but I'm happy it's down either way. And so about that time, I swing my gun back over to one of the other does just to kind of see what's going on through the scope. And the buck is hauling balls like out of there. He is over the next hill already and out. And these two fawns that are standing there, they're just clueless. They look at her, they look over to where they heard the gunshots from, they look at the doe that's down, they look back at us, and they have absolutely zero clue what's going on. So we lay there for a couple more seconds, and we're starting to kind of figure things out and say, okay, these fawns clearly aren't going anywhere. And in Montana, you have what's called a doe fawn tag, or you have a buck tag for antelope. Well, a doe fawn tag is good for an antelope doe or a fawn, buck or doe, that has basically the horns have to be less than 4 inches at the skull base, from the skull base. And so one thing you're looking for when you're looking for a buck antelope versus a doe antelope, they're definitively distinguishable regardless of antler size or horn size by a black patch on their cheek. Well, these two fawns that are standing here, they're definitively classified as fawns because of the horn size, but we're still, ideally we'd like to take a fawn doe if we can, and not take a buck out of the herd, but you're still trying to figure this out. So one of these guys, every time he'd turn one direction, there was like no spot. You couldn't see any black on his face at all. The other direction he would turn, you could see just this little faint line. Like, I mean, these are like young of the year fawns. So it's tough to tell anyway. And for sure, like that's probably one of the reasons Montana implements a horn size, because it's so hard to tell. But anyway, so one of them, I'm 90% convinced it's a doe. And the other one, you can definitively on both sides see like a black line. They're both exactly the same size, but one looks like a buck, one looks like a doe. So we're like, okay, if we have the opportunity and they stay there, let's try to get closer and figure out what we got to do to get Jess a shot. Because at this point, with her missing, we don't really know what happened. We don't have time to review the footage. We still have animals standing in front of us, at like 260 yards or so. And so we kind of get up, we go back to our gear out of sight of these antelope. We pack up the packs, get the spotting scope that we had left back there and all of our stuff, get everything ready. And then we start heading over. And so, well, let's go slow over this little rise, because we might end up running right back into those. If they never left that doe, they'll be there and we might get a closer shot. And that's exactly what happened. We got up over this little knob, and the two fawns are standing there. They look at us. They don't really know what to do. So we got down low, we crawled, we got Jess set up again, this time about 150 yards from them, and basically had to play a waiting game again with these things, because they're playing, crisscross applesauce, standing in front of each other. And we had the one picked out that we were 90% sure was a doe, lined it up, picked it out. And every time Jess would get close, flip that safety off, they'd cross paths, or they'd stand in front of each other, or they wouldn't go broadside. They'd face you or face away from you. And so it was kind of a frustrating game, but kind of a funny game, like a circus act is really what it looked like. And Jess was an absolute champ. She stayed the course. She stayed on him. And I think she was getting kind of annoyed with me, because I was constantly saying, oh, it's the one to the back. It's the one to the left. Oh, it's the one to the front now. It's the one to the right. And she, of course, is watching all this, so she knows. I was just trying to be a good partner there and make sure she knew, which one we were trying to target. So anyway, all things finally stand clear. The two antelopes separate. They're both standing perfectly broadside. And I, basically give her the thumbs up. She squeezes the trigger. Boom. Her antelope drops dead before it hits the ground. Just perfect shot. Like the best shot you want. Little high shoulder action. And so that was that, man. She got her first antelope, and we have two antelope down on the first hunt of the year, opening day, and Jess's first antelope is down. So we walk up to Jess's antelope, And it ends up being, it is a buck fawn, but it's definitively a fawn young of the year. Anyway, just absolutely beautiful animal. Jess was stoked about it. She kept kind of making comments like, "Oh, I wish I got the bigger one," but it doesn't really matter, man. It was an awesome hunt. She filled her tag. I filled my tag. We doubled up for the first time ever and got her first antelope ever. Couldn't be more excited about it. Just absolutely stoked about what happened and how it happened. Man, what an awesome hunt to be a part of. I absolutely love hunting with my wife. She's a little bit newer to it than I am. And every single time I get to go out with her, and it's an absolute adventure. And I love letting her call the shots, man. Her first hunt ever, her first animal she ever got was a whitetail doe here in Montana. And it happened based off shots that she called. And then last year she harvested her first buck, which is an awesome 3x3 muley, again, based off something that seemed totally crazy to me, a game plan that would never work. She said, "Aaron, let's do it." And of course, it worked out perfect, made a beautiful 260-yard shot on her first buck. And now this year, harvesting her first antelope ever. Based off a game plan that she called out. And again, a plan that I was looking at from one perspective, didn't think it made sense. And then she says, "You know what, let's take the long road. Let's stick to our plan throughout the course." And look what happened. We ended up doubling up on an awesome hunt. She got her first antelope ever. We got a ton of antelope meat in the freezer. We've been munching on that over the last couple of weeks and just couldn't be happier with how everything played out. It's a lesson in life that, not every single plan that we see or a path that we're going to take to meet a goal is going to make sense to us. It might seem like it's the harder version of what we could do, but you know what? Sometimes that harder version is made for our own personal growth, and God puts us on paths that don't always make sense, so that way we can achieve things above and beyond what we thought was possible, go through things that we never thought we could get through, and overall become better people and become stronger people and have stronger faith based off these obstacles that we overcome along the way. So take that into your week, guys. Thanks for listening. We absolutely appreciate every single person who listens to this. Be sure to go out and check out lightthefireoutdoors.com, Facebook, all these other places you can find us. And of course, the main thing you need to keep in mind is when you're out there on your road, taking that path less traveled, keep praying and slaying.